When you turn 50, people don't see ambition in your eyes anymore. They see expiration dates. At least that's how it felt the day I was called into the corner office and told, "We're letting you go, Robert. You've had a good run. But the company needs younger energy." Younger energy. Those words cut deeper than any layoff notice ever could. My name is Robert Hayes, and for nearly 30 years, I had poured my sweat and soul into that company. I started as a junior account manager, the guy who made cold calls until my throat was raw. I missed birthdays, anniversaries, school plays, all for the promise that loyalty and hard work would pay off. And for a while it did. I climbed to senior manager, then director, then vice president. I thought I'd finish my career there, retire with dignity, maybe even get a plaque on the wall. Instead, I walked out carrying a cardboard box filled with framed certificates, a photo of my kids, and a coffee mug that read, "World's Best Dad," a gift from a Father's Day long ago when my children still believed I was unshakable. I wasn't unshakable. Not anymore. The whispers had started months earlier. New hires, sharp, hungry 20-somethings with perfect suits and faster laptops, looked at me like I was an artifact. "Old school," one of them said once when he thought I wasn't listening. Meetings that I used to lead were suddenly streamlined without me. My suggestions, once valued, were now brushed aside with polite smiles. The day of my firing, the HR director handed me a severance packet with forced sympathy in her eyes. "You'll land on your feet, Robert. You have experience." Experience, the polite word for obsolete. I went home to an empty house. My wife Margaret had left 2 years earlier. Tired of the long hours, tired of my constant promises that it will all pay off. My kids were grown, living their own lives, calling occasionally out of obligation. That night I sat in the living room with the lights off, staring at my severance papers. 50 years old, divorced, unemployed, alone. The silence in that house was deafening. The weeks that followed blurred together. I polished my resume, sent out applications, went to interviews where hiring managers half my age looked at me with polite discomfort. Some didn't bother to hide their bias. One recruiter actually said, "Honestly, Robert, we're looking for someone with more energy." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by the collar and shout, "Do you know how many contracts I've closed? Do you know the nights I stayed in the office while your parents were still in college?" But I didn't. I just nodded, shook his hand, and walked out into the cold. My savings dwindled. I canceled subscriptions, sold my second car, and cut back on everything. I tried freelancing, consulting, nothing stuck. The industry I had given 3 decades to had moved on, leaving me in the dust. Then came the lowest point. I was walking downtown, passing by the office building where I had spent half my life. Through the glass windows, I saw them. The new generation, the young men and women who had replaced me. They laughed over coffee, tapped away on their sleek laptops, brainstormed on whiteboards like they were reinventing the world. And there, in my old office, sat a kid named Daniel, 27, fresh MBA, the golden child they had chosen over me. I stood outside in the freezing wind, watching him adjust his tie in the reflection of the glass, looking every bit the future of the company. My company. That night I hit rock bottom. I sat at my kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey. Unpaid bills spread out in front of me like a cruel gallery of failure. For the first time in my life, I wondered if I had any reason to keep fighting. But something inside me refused to die. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was the thought of my daughter, Emily, who still occasionally called to check in, who always ended her messages with, "I love you, Dad." I couldn't let her see me broken. The next morning, hungover and hollow, I looked in the mirror. The man staring back at me was tired, graying, and scarred by life. But he wasn't finished. If the world thought I was too old to matter, then I'd prove them wrong. I didn't know how yet. I didn't have a plan or money or even confidence. But I had something those kids in glass offices didn't. 3 decades of scars. And maybe, just maybe, those scars could become my greatest weapon. That was the day the seed of revenge and rebirth was planted. Unemployment has a way of stripping a man of his pride piece by piece. At first, I wore my old suits to networking events, smiled, and introduced myself with the practiced confidence of a former executive. But weeks turned into months, and the suits gathered dust. The smiles felt forced. The introductions turned into muttered admissions. I'm between jobs right now. The rejection emails piled up. Some didn't even bother to reply. My phone, once buzzing with clients and meetings, now sat silent on the nightstand. I was running out of savings. Soon, the mortgage would eat me alive. I needed money. Fast. That's when I saw the sign. It was a small flyer taped to the window of a corner coffee shop. Local businesses seeking experienced help. Inquire inside. Normally, I would have walked past. I was used to multi-million-dollar contracts, not odd jobs. But desperation makes you swallow pride. I stepped inside, ordered the cheapest coffee, and asked the barista about the flyer. She pointed me toward the back, where a group of small business owners gathered weekly. A grocery store manager, a bakery owner, a hardware store guy. People running the kind of shops I'd driven past for years without noticing. They were struggling too. Competing against big corporations, against delivery apps, against a world that didn't care about the little guy anymore. I sat quietly at first, sipping my bitter coffee, listening to their complaints. Late deliveries, lost customers, supply problems. And then something clicked. For 30 years, I had managed logistics, negotiated contracts, and built client relationships. These problems weren't foreign to me. They were my bread and butter. I leaned forward. Have you tried consolidating your deliveries? If 3 of you are shipping to the same part of town, you're wasting money running separate vans. They all turned to look at me. The grocery manager frowned. Who are you? Robert Hayes, I said, straightening in my chair. I used to run distribution for a mid-size corporation. I know a thing or two about moving goods efficiently. The bakery owner raised an eyebrow. And what are you doing here? I hesitated. Admitting I was broke and unemployed felt like ripping open a wound. But then I said the truth. Looking for a second chance. They exchanged glances. By the end of that meeting, I walked out with a trial agreement. I would coordinate their deliveries. Groceries, bread, hardware supplies. Using nothing but my old SUV and a notebook. If I could prove I could save them time and money, they'd pay me. If not, I'd disappear. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't corporate, but it was something. My first week was chaos. I mapped routes on paper, taped schedules to my dashboard, and loaded my SUV until it groaned under the weight. I drove through traffic, rain, and endless honking horns. By night, I collapsed into bed, muscles aching, hands stiff on the wheel. But for the first time in months, I felt alive. The bakery owner called after a delivery. Robert, you were early. Customers loved it. The grocery manager texted, sales up this week, thanks. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Word began to spread. Other shops asked if I could help. A florist, a pharmacy, a small bookstore. Soon my notebook was filled with scribbled addresses and delivery times. I wasn't making much, but every dollar I earned was mine. Not a severance package, not charity. Mine. And more than money, I was building something I hadn't felt in years. Relevance. Then came the moment that changed everything. One evening, I delivered a package to a law firm downtown. A junior partner signed for it, barely glancing at me. But as I turned to leave, a familiar voice called my name. Robert. I froze. Standing there was Daniel, the same golden boy who had taken my old office, my old title, my old life. His suit was sharp, his smile smug. Well, well, he said, smirking. Didn't expect to see you playing delivery man. The humiliation hit like a punch to the gut. My cheeks burned, my fists clenched. For a moment, I wanted to hurl the package at his polished shoes. But instead, I forced a smile. Just helping out some clients. He chuckled. Clients. Robert, you're 50, it's over. Guys like you don't come back. I walked out of that building shaking with rage. But under the anger, something else burned brighter. Determination. If Daniel thought it was over, then I would make damn sure it wasn't. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my worn notebook and a pen. I drew circles, arrows, rough numbers, delivery routes, client growth, expansion ideas. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was planning. And deep inside, a thought began to take root. Dangerous, impossible, intoxicating. What if one day I could build something strong enough to buy back the company that fired me? That seed of revenge kept me alive. Every delivery, every sleepless night, every aching muscle. It all fed that vision. The world thought I was finished, but I was just getting started. The notebook on my kitchen table became my war map. Every scribble, every circle, every note was a piece of the empire I wanted to build. It wasn't much, just delivery routes and client names. But in those messy pages lived a dream bigger than anything I'd dared to imagine at 50. I started waking up at 5 a.m., not because I had to, but because I couldn't wait to get back to work. My old SUV turned into a mobile office. Coffee cups, delivery slips, and maps cluttered the passenger seat. The radio played softly, but most of the time I drove in silence, thinking, planning, calculating. The first challenge hit sooner than I expected. One Saturday, my SUV broke down in the middle of a delivery. Groceries spoiled in the back while I stood helplessly on the side of the road, cursing at smoke pouring from the hood. I called clients, apologizing, offering free deliveries to make up for it. Some understood, others didn't. That night, sitting in my dark kitchen, I nearly gave up. My savings were almost gone. Repairs would cost more than I could afford. The humiliation of calling clients to admit I'd failed gnawed at me. But then the phone rang. It was Hassan, the grocery store manager who'd first trusted me. "Robert," he said, "don't quit. People around here need you. I'll advance you a little for next week's deliveries. Get the car fixed." His voice was gruff, but it carried something I hadn't felt in months. Faith. So I pushed forward. I fixed the SUV, tightened my budget, and doubled my effort. Rain, snow, scorching heat. I showed up, on time, every time. And slowly, my reputation grew. Within 6 months, I had too many clients for one man to handle. The notebook wasn't enough anymore. Calls came in at all hours. A florist needing an urgent delivery, a bakery short on staff, a pharmacy with prescriptions to drop off. I needed help. Hiring terrified me. What if I couldn't pay them? What if they ruined my fragile reputation? But I remembered a lesson from my corporate years. You can't grow alone. So I placed a small ad. Driver wanted, must be reliable, punctual, trustworthy. That's how I met Luis. He was 30, soft-spoken, a single father trying to support his daughter. His old van was barely running, but his eyes burned with the same desperation I'd seen in my own reflection. "I'll never be late," he promised during the interview. I need a chance." I shook his hand. "You've got one." The first time Luis returned from a shift, his daughter sat in the passenger seat, grinning with pride as he unloaded boxes. I paid him cash that night, and he looked at me with gratitude I'll never forget. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was responsible for someone else's survival. Business snowballed. More clients called. Word spread about the old guy who never missed a delivery. Soon, I had 3 drivers, then 4. My kitchen walls were plastered with maps, schedules, receipts. My house looked less like a home and more like a command center. And then came the day I knew I was on the right path. I landed a contract with a chain of local pharmacies. Steady, reliable work that doubled our income overnight. I signed the papers with trembling hands, barely believing it was real. That night I sat at my table staring at the contract, a glass of water in my hand instead of whiskey. I whispered to myself, "This is only the beginning." But success has a way of drawing attention. One afternoon I was making a delivery downtown when I saw him again. Daniel, the golden boy who had taken my old office. He spotted me loading boxes into my SUV and smirked. "Still playing delivery man?" he mocked. I smiled thinly. "Business is good," he laughed. "Business? Come on, Robert, you're running errands. Don't fool yourself." I wanted to tell him about the contracts, the drivers, the growing reputation. I wanted to shove the signed agreement in his smug face, but instead I just said, "We'll see." His smirk faltered for just a second, but it was enough. That night, as I sat updating routes with Luis at my side, I made a silent promise. One day, Daniel would eat those words. Growth brought new challenges. Clients demanded faster service. Drivers made mistakes. Gas prices soared. There were nights I collapsed into bed, certain I'd bitten off more than I could chew. But every morning I woke with fire in my chest. For the first time in years, I wasn't working for someone else's dream. I was building my own. And the more I built, the clearer my vision became. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about redemption. This was about revenge. One day, not soon, not easily, but one day, I would take back the company that had thrown me away like yesterday, cause trash. Not as an employee, not as a manager, as the owner. Within a year, the notebook on my kitchen table was no longer enough. The business had outgrown my scribbles. I moved everything to spreadsheets, then software. My drivers, Luis, Karen, Jamal, and Priya, weren't just workers anymore. They were a team. We called ourselves Hayes Logistics. It felt strange at first, seeing my name printed on invoices and delivery slips. But every time I looked at it, I felt a surge of pride. This wasn't a company I served. This was a company I built. We rented a small office space above a hardware store. It wasn't glamorous. Flickering lights, peeling paint, the faint smell of sawdust. But it was ours. I bought secondhand desks, a whiteboard, and a used coffee machine that wheezed like it was dying every morning. My team didn't care. They were just happy to belong to something real. Clients trusted us. Shops recommended us. Word spread. And soon, we weren't just competing with local delivery apps. We were beating them. But success never goes unnoticed. One morning, I walked into the office to find Karen pale-faced holding a letter. "Robert, you should see this." It was a cease and desist from a corporate logistics giant, Transtech Solutions. According to the letter, we were infringing on their regional service agreements. In plain English, they wanted us gone. I knew what this meant. Small businesses had always complained about Transtech's late deliveries and inflated fees. We'd cut into their profits by being reliable and affordable. And they didn't like it. I gathered the team. They think a letter is going to scare us. But we're not going anywhere. We don't have their money. But we have something better. Luis frowned. "What's that?" "Reputation," I said firmly. "Every client we've served knows we keep our word. That's something Transtech can't buy." The fight wasn't easy. Transtech slashed prices to steal back clients. They flooded neighborhoods with advertisements, promising discounts. Some small shops wavered. A few even left us, but most stayed. Not because we were cheaper, but because we cared. I personally called clients when there were delays. I apologized when mistakes happened. I showed up when drivers couldn't, and slowly, our loyalty base grew stronger. That loyalty caught the attention of bigger players. One evening, I was reviewing invoices when I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Hayes?" a voice asked. "This is Richard Lawson, CEO of Lawson Pharmaceuticals. We've heard about your company. We'd like to discuss a delivery contract." I nearly dropped the phone. Lawson Pharmaceuticals wasn't just a client. It was the client, a regional powerhouse with multi-million-dollar distribution needs. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. Doubts crept in. I was still driving an SUV with a dented bumper. My office was above a hardware store. How could I compete with giants like Transtech? Then I remembered Daniel's smirk, his words, "It's over, Robert. Guys like you don't come back." I looked in the mirror. "Watch me," I whispered. The next morning I wore my best suit, the same one I'd been fired in 2 years earlier, except this time, I walked into the boardroom not as an employee begging for a job, but as a man offering a solution. Richard Lawson sat at the head of the table, flanked by executives. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "we've reviewed your performance. Your company has an impeccable reputation for reliability, but we have concerns about your scale." I took a breath. You're right. We're small, but that's why we succeed. We don't treat deliveries as numbers, we treat them as promises. And I promise you this, Lawson Pharmaceuticals will never wonder where their shipments are, because I will personally guarantee every one of them. Silence filled the room. Then Lawson leaned back, studying me. Finally, he smiled. You remind me of myself 30 years ago. Let's give this a try. The contract was ours. When I told my team, the office erupted in cheers. Luis lifted his daughter onto his shoulders, shouting, "We did it!" Karen cried. Jamal hugged me so tightly I thought he'd break my ribs. That night, I stood outside the office, staring at our name painted on the window, Hayes Logistics. For the first time, I believed we weren't just surviving anymore. We were a real company. But success also brought shadows. A week later, I received another unexpected call. This time, it wasn't Lawson, it was Daniel. "Congratulations on your little contract," he sneered. "Word travels fast, but don't fool yourself, Robert. You're still a small fish, and small fish get eaten." I gripped the phone. Then maybe it's time someone reminded the sharks that small fish can bite back. He laughed, low and mocking. "We'll see." When the line went dead, I stood in silence, my heart pounding. This wasn't just business anymore. It was war. Hayes Logistics was no longer a small operation. Within 3 years, we grew from 4 drivers to 50. Our fleet of dented vans and hand-me-down cars turned into branded trucks with bold letters across the sides. Hayes Logistics. On time, every time. Our office moved from the dusty room above the hardware store to a proper building downtown. Glass doors, reception desk, conference rooms. The kind of place I used to work in, except this time, it was mine. And yet, no matter how high we climbed, one name still haunted me. Trans-Tech Solutions. The company that had mocked me, threatened me, tried to crush me. The same company where Daniel sat as a rising executive, grinning from behind his polished desk. They were bleeding now. My team's relentless service had eaten into their contracts. Lawson Pharmaceuticals shifted more deliveries to us. Pharmacies, bakeries, shops, all preferred us over them. Trans-Tech had money, but we had loyalty. And loyalty, I learned, was priceless. One evening, Luis came rushing into my office with a newspaper. "Robert, you need to see this." The headline made my pulse quicken. Trans-Tech facing bankruptcy amid rising competition. I read the article twice, barely believing the words. Their profits had plummeted. Shareholders were bailing. The once untouchable giant was crumbling. I leaned back in my chair, the irony washing over me. The company that had called me too old was collapsing under the weight of its arrogance. But I didn't want to just watch them fall. I wanted to finish what they started. Weeks later, I sat in a boardroom, not as a desperate employee, but as a potential buyer. Trans-Tech's executives looked worn and defeated, shadows of their former selves. Daniel was there too. Still young, still sharp, but the smugness in his eyes was fading. The lead negotiator cleared his throat. "Mr. Hayes, as you know, Trans-Tech is seeking acquisition. We've had several offers. Why should we sell to you?" I looked around the table, steady and calm. "Because I know your weaknesses better than anyone. I built my company by fixing the problems you ignored. Clients trust us because we deliver what you couldn't. If you want Trans-Tech's name to survive, even as a memory, it belongs under Hayes Logistics." Daniel's jaw tightened. "This is absurd. He's an old man with a mom-and-pop fleet. We should reject this insult." I met his glare. "Funny. That's what you said when you replaced me. Tell me, Daniel, how's that working out for you?" The room fell silent. The negotiator leaned forward. "Mr. Hayes, are you prepared to make an offer?" I slid the folder across the table. Inside was everything. Years of savings, investments, loans backed by Lawson Pharmaceuticals, and the undeniable proof that Hayes Logistics was just strong enough to survive. We were strong enough to dominate. They flipped through the pages, whispering among themselves. Finally, the lead negotiator nodded. "Your offer is acceptable." And just like that, it was done. Trans-Tech Solutions, the company that fired me for being too old, now belonged to me. The day the papers were signed, I stood outside their glass building, the same one where I once walked out humiliated, carrying a cardboard box. Only this time I walked in as the owner. Employees stared as I passed. Some recognized me, their eyes wide. Daniel was waiting in the lobby, red-faced and furious. "This isn't over," he hissed. I smiled. Yes, it is. For years he had been my shadow, my tormentor, the living reminder of everything I'd lost. But standing there, I realized something. He wasn't my enemy anymore. He was just a footnote in the story of my comeback. That evening, I gathered my team. Luis, Karen, Jamal, Priya, and dozens more who had stood with me through storms and sleepless nights. We crowded into the conference room of our new building, laughter and applause filling the air. I raised a glass of water, not whiskey. To second chances, I said, to proving them wrong, to every person who told us it was too late. The room erupted in cheers. Later, when the crowd had thinned, I stood by the window overlooking the city. Neon lights flickered, cars streamed below, and in the reflection of the glass, I saw the man I had become. Not the broken, discarded employee of 50, not the drunk staring at unpaid bills, but Robert Hayes, survivor, builder, leader, owner. I thought of my daughter, Emily. That night I called her. "Dad," she answered, surprise in her voice. "I wanted you to hear it from me," I said. "I just bought the company that fired me." There was silence, then a laugh, then softly, "I'm proud of you, Dad." My throat tightened. "Thank you, sweetheart." When I hung up, I whispered to myself. They said I was too old, but the truth is, I was just getting started.